All right. So because the products are differentiated, then based on people's preferences, so we can say, well, based on preferences, people don't have the same demand for each product, have different, well, let's see, are willing to pay different prices for the different products. Okay, they're willing to pay a different price for different products. Okay, so there's like, if we look in the world of fast food hamburgers, then there's going to be some products that are a little bit more gourmet. Maybe the ingredients are more natural, or maybe they have a reputation for quality, or they make the product there. And people are going to be willing to pay a little bit more for those kind of burgers. And then if there's another one where it's their thing is that they're everywhere, and they have a standardized process and it tastes the same no matter where you go or something like that, then maybe people are willing to pay a little bit less for that company's burgers. Okay, so each of the individual fast food restaurants kind of faces its own demand curve. Now the demand curves are all interrelated because they're all close substitutes, but it has its own demand curve. So that's the first key thing. In this kind of market, each firm's product has its own demand curve. And this is the same idea as for monopoly, but the difference is going to be later on what happens, how do they affect each other, okay? But each firm has its own demand. So they are, again, I'll make this in red, they are not price takers. So it's not price takers like we had in perfect competition. And that is the key idea. So what that means when we say we're not price takers, it means a couple of things. So one thing, and I'll draw this here, I'll draw a demand curve. So one thing it means is that our demand is downward sloping. Okay, so this is the demand for one firm's products or product. Okay, it's downward sloping, and this firm has its own demand for its own product. Then second thing, so that's downward sloping, and whenever that's downward sloping, then we know marginal revenue is going to be less than demand, just like in monopoly. So if you don't remember this part, go back to the monopoly part, because that's exactly the same idea. So marginal revenue is below the demand, so they're not a price taker. So this tells us two things: they have a downward sloping demand, and the second one is we have marginal revenue is going to be less than the price. Okay, remember the demand curve gives us the price, so marginal revenue is now less than the price. And this again is the normal case, and it's the case we saw last week in monopoly. Okay, so that's a key idea here, is that we have we're not price takers, and that means we have a downward sloping demand, and our marginal revenue is less than our price. Okay, so now let's think about how do we find our max. So let's I think we have time in this video, so let's go ahead and do it. So how do we find the profit maximizing price and quantity? So when you're a price taker, you're only choosing quantity. When you are a price maker, you're choosing both kind of at the same time. Okay, so let's draw let's say their average cost curve goes like this. Okay, and let's make their marginal cost curve go like this. Okay, so we've got our average cost, we've got our marginal cost, and then let's have our demand curve. Demand curve goes like this. Okay, and then finally we've got our marginal revenue curve going here. Okay, so I'm kind of freelancing with these things, so we'll see. Hopefully this works out. All right, so same steps. We find marginal revenue equal to marginal cost to get the quantity. Okay, so that means we go here and we get this I'll use blue. We get this point. So this tells me what quantity to choose, and then we go up to demand to get a price. Okay, so go up to demand to get our price, right? And so then here is going to be the price. That's the price they choose. And then finally, then we can find the profit. And I will do yellow for the profit. Okay, so where's the profit? The profit is P minus average total cost. That's a profit for 1 unit. This is 1 unit. and then we times it by Q. Okay, so how do we find it? We find it on the graph. There's P, and for that same quantity, there's average total cost. So that height is how much they make in 1 unit. And then we just bring it across 2 times by Q, we get this whole area. And so that is, okay. So that's how we do it. And this so far looks exactly the same as a monopoly. Where you're going to find is, and it is the same as the monopoly. Now, a couple of differences. One, it will tend to be, but since this one has lots of close substitutes, the demand will be a little more elastic than the monopoly case, although they're different types of products, so you can't just compare them directly like that. But the second thing is going to be what happens later on. Okay, so what happens later on when, in the long run, if they're getting this profit? So in this particular case, we have a profit is greater than 0, we can tell. Okay, and so the next video is going to be about what happens in the long run if that is true. So before we continue, I don't want to mislead you in thinking that every firm in monopolistic competition makes positive profit in the short run. Okay, so here there's positive profit. So before we move on, I want to show you an example of when a firm could also be making negative profit. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that case real quick before we move on. Okay, so let me go ahead and draw things. Cost. I'm freehanding this. I'm attempting to draw basically the same curves, but I don't really care about the details of it exactly here, so that's why I'm not being that careful. Okay, and then let's suppose our demand looks something like this. If that was the case, our marginal revenue. Okay, so the rules are still the same. We go to our marginal revenue equal to marginal cost to find the quantity, and then we go up to the demand curve to find the price. Okay, so that's still the same. That's the same as before. But here there's a little difference that we didn't have before. Are we making any profit? And the answer is no. We're making a negative profit. So let's go ahead and draw our negative profit. So this is our profit right here. We're charging this price here, but we have this much cost per unit. So we're losing. So our P minus ATC, sorry about this, is negative, right? So we're losing money. Right, so here we have a negative profit. Okay, so it's possible to have a negative profit. It's possible to have a positive profit. But either way, the method for finding the optimal quantity and price and finding the level of the profit is the same. So our profit is here, and this is profit. And just to remind you here, in this case, it's negative. Okay, maybe I should have made it red. Then let's see, one other thing. Now just to review, the same rules we found before still apply. So is this firm going to be willing to produce in the short run at this negative profit? Well, it depends. And you should say, well, ask yourself, what does it depend on? What it depends on is where's the average variable cost. So for example, if average variable cost was like here, if this is average variable cost, then yes. So for example, in this case, because our price is greater than average variable cost, so price is greater than average variable cost, they're still willing to produce in the short run. Okay, so that still applies. I just wanted to mention that. So because there would be a case if the price was lower than their average variable cost, then they would just shut down completely, even in the short run. But we want to ignore that situation. So we're going to make the assumption that the price is greater than average variable cost, so they will produce in the short run. Okay, so just to review, where the method to find is the same, but it is possible to get a positive profit or a negative profit. Now, in the next video, we're going to come back and look at what happens in the long run in these two cases.